Hey, everybody. I want to talk about a topic that, if I said this to you, would have most people running for the exits. So, if I said, hey, everybody, you know what we're going to talk about today? We're going to talk about unconscious bias in machine learning. That's a party favorite right there. Now, wait, before you run for the exits, before I've got you screaming for your life, oh my God, you might as well talk about periods. I get it. It's not fun, yet it's such an important topic to talk about. We have to lean into it. We have to talk about it. And that's the topic of what Sandy Carter and I are going to talk about at South by Southwest. On March 12th, we are talking about unconscious bias in machine learning. Now, talk about a party. I mean, that's a party right there. That is the humor trifecta. Well, let me tell you how it relates. Some of the stories around how bias shows up in programming, in how insurance rates are decided, how mortgage loans are decided, who gets what resources, how certain toys are made, and for whom, by whom. A lot of that has to do with programming. And human beings we're flesh bags. We all have unconscious bias. So what happens when well-intended human beings, each with his or her own unconscious bias, creates an algorithm? And that algorithm, unbeknownst to them, has bias towards some group or against some group completely unconsciously. But then the result of that bias is people are not being charged the same rates. People in inner cities can't afford insurance. People in certain zip codes can't get loans at reasonable rates. All of these things can and do happen. Mattel created a talking doll for girls. Not one of those programmers on that Mattel team was female. How did that go? Not so well. So there are some funny cautionary tales. There's some funny tales. There's some not so funny tales. And I believe we can learn a lot through humor. Humor can sort of bring everybody down. We're going to talk about it because it's super important. But we're going to talk about something really important that nobody wants to talk about. And we're going to laugh and we're going to learn. And we're going to tell these funny stories. And we're going to use some principles from improv comedy to lean into this whole conversation because it does matter. It does matter. Bias, unconscious bias, especially in machine learning, is addressable and fixable, and we can reduce it. So what are some of the things we're going to talk about? Well, and by the way, did you know that there's a whole branch of That's What She Said jokes totally created to test That's What She Said jokes? There's a whole branch of machine learning dedicated towards, can we replicate humor? So far, my job is safe because humor relies also on self-awareness, empathy, and context. And you might be able to teach certain words of context. But so far, my job and most funny people's jobs are safe. They're safe. So here's the thing. From improv comedy, we have this concept called yes and, where we lean into and we say yes and to different offers and choices, and that moves a scene forward. Well, in companies, we're going to have to lean in and yes and some things. We're going to have to lean into towards diversity. 90% of machine learning programmers are male. Now, that's not an issue in and of itself, except when your bias, maybe you didn't think about things from a female perspective, and all of a sudden you're designing programs and toys made for girls or women that have real consequences, and there's things you just didn't take into consideration. That becomes an issue. So we're going to lean into diversity of teams. We're going to lean into governance. And I hate more bureaucracy. Nobody hates more bureaucracy more than me. I do think we have to have a combination of tech solutions and human solutions. So we're going to have better governance. We're going to lean into diversity. We're going to have teams that ask the question, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Have you thought of this? The most underrepresented group in all data sets, according to IBM, are people with disabilities. And that has real consequences. Are people asking those questions in your data? Where are the people with disabilities? And it matters because if you extrapolate data based on algorithms from the past and you predict a certain percent of people with disabilities, you could be underrepresenting that number. And if those numbers are what's used to get funding for people with disability, well, then people with disability won't get the funding they need for certain programs, applications, resources, all those things. These are real life consequences. And we're also going to yes and this spirit of like moving forward. How do we take something that has such high impact but low intent? And when we yes and, we make it safe to talk about it. Yes and is about bringing up hard conversations internally. And rather than having people shut down, because I mean, nobody loves talking about unconscious bias. But if we have people say, you know what, that's an important conversation to have, we're going to yes and that. And we're going to have people, multidisciplinary team from different parts of the company, all asking these questions and holding everybody to a higher standard. So between machine learning techniques that filter out bias or reduce bias and human beings asking the tough questions, we can reduce the bias that happens. So there's some funny stories. Everybody has bias. I think unconscious bias, humorously, is when you have it. Intentional bias is when somebody else has it. They're a jerk. They're an a-hole. I have unconscious bias. I didn't intend to do it. And the point of unconscious bias is nobody intends to. And if I asked a whole room of people, who here has unconscious bias? Most people, a lot of people wouldn't raise their hands. Some people would lower their hands. All right, who here does things intentionally? Nobody would raise their hand. Who thinks some other jerk does it intentionally? Yeah, they're jerky, but I do it unintentionally. And it's all perspective. And yet the answer is we all have unconscious bias that we need to be aware of. So we're going to talk about it in, I think, a fun way, no judgment. We're just going to kind of laugh at it. Some of the stories are pretty interesting, from beauty pageants where it was all AI chosen, and the AI models were all built on Caucasian women standards of beauty. And, well, so all the winners that were picked with machine learning were all Caucasian. Why? Because the people who programmed facial asymmetry and facial recognition for this kind of thing, and it was all AI judged, programmed out their own internal standards of beauty, which they may not have even realized existed. In Australia and other places where Asian males, take a passport photo, the passport photo gets rejected because it looks to see that your eyes are open, but it bases that based on the ratio, the eyelid ratio and everything based on a sample of data based on Caucasian people. So it does happen. And these are very real things that have real life consequences. That doll I talked about, Mattel should have had women involved in the design of that doll and programming when they had a kind of a chip inside that would give these different sayings. You don't want an all-male team programming a Mattel doll for girls. No, let's just say that you do not want that right now. And it's very funny because it was such an avoidable thing where millions were spent on the design of this thing. And had they thought to have women involved in the project, there you go. That would not have happened. So there are real consequences to it, and we're going to try to make it fun. Is it a fun thing to talk about? No, but here's the thing: it's fixable. It's addressable. It's a real thing. And if we don't, and we're relying on machines to fix everything in the future, we're in trouble, because machines will only extrapolate what they're taught. And if the underlying algorithms are biased, well, that's what's going to happen projected into the future. So we're going to have to figure some stuff out. Let's laugh. Let's have some fun. I hope you join us. Our hashtag is ML bias sucks, SUX, because we were character limited. So hashtag ML machine learning bias sucks with an X. That's our hashtag for South by. And my husband had to point out that when he first saw it, he saw MLB. He's a baseball fan. He said, "What? Major League Baseball? What? Major League Baseball? UX design? What? That is a very confusing hashtag." Yes, it is a very confusing hashtag. But we were limited on characters. So if you are going to go to South by Southwest, I hope you join us. We're going to laugh. We're going to just put everybody at ease. And I think you'll be surprised at some of the stories out there that I think people don't even think about. You just think, wow, machines are going to fix all our problems. And then when you really see how machines have kind of screwed things up because of biased algorithms, you see how far we have to go, but it is a fixable problem. So let's laugh and learn together. I hope you join us March 12th, 11 a.m. Sandy Carter and I will be delivering this, and we're going to have some fun. So if you've got any unconscious bias stories, machine learning, please let me know. I would love to know what those are. If you've got them, please let me know. We're always finding new stories, and some of them are actually horrifying, but some are pretty funny. And if you kind of dig beneath the surface, you'll see it was a real clear case of if somebody would have thought about having a diverse team of programmers or a governance team to look at and ask questions. Have we thought of this? Have we thought of this? Have a checklist that you go down every time you program something out to ask these questions. You could see where it would have made a real difference, and a lot of embarrassment and time and all this energy would have been saved. However, we wouldn't have the funny stories. So we are going to tell those funny stories. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend, and hashtag ML Bias Sucks with an X. We will see you at South by Southwest. I want those stories, everybody. Take it easy. I'm Kathy Klotz-Guest at keepingithuman.com. Bye-bye.